Hey, welcome back to Midas Letter Live. My guest this segment is Walter Hanych. He's the CEO of Signature Resources, trading on the TSX Venture under the symbol SGU. Walter, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, James.
Walter, the Lingman Lake project in northern Ontario is attracting a lot of attention, and not least of which is because of the historic resource and the history of the project. Tell me about what attracts the project to you.
Well, I guess what attracted me to the project was the fact that it is a deposit that was initially developed in the 40s, where it almost achieved production on a resource base of about 60,000 ounces. Mm-hmm. And for various reasons, specifically, largely driven by the economy post-war, the project didn't achieve the financing to take it to that level. And then the next major effort at taking it to production was in the late 80s. And a company from Calgary drilled over 30,000 meters, got a resource estimate at that time of about 230,000 ounces. And we had every intention to take it into production, commission the mine site to that level. But again, the economy, the equity market tanked in the early 90s. Legal situations developed, and the company went into receivership. So the fact that historically it's had this work in the past, it's in a greenstone belt that's wide open for exploration. The geology was very favorable, lended itself to expansion of that resource. That's what really attracted us to the project.
Sure. Some of the historic non-43 101 information that obviously should not be relied on to make an investment decision, but is interesting nonetheless just from a historical perspective. There was some sampling done in the late 1800s, if I recall correctly, on the shaft that was sunk to access the mineralization.
That's correct. I believe that was in 1948.
Oh, okay, so not that long ago.
Not that long ago. Long enough for most of us.
Right.
A raise was driven up from the 275 level to the 150 level. Now, a raise is like a vertical shaft between two levels. And it's usually driven into your zone, which was considered ore at the time, to outline it, to block it off. And this particular raise, through its entire length, assayed 28 grams per ton, which is incredible. Mm-hmm. Within that distance to achieve that kind of a high grade. Right.
That's what caught my attention on this project as well, was that sort of, and the drilling that was done in the 60s, I believe it was, did end in mineralization that was quite high grade.
Most of the drilling was done in the 80s, actually.
In the 80s.
In the late 80s.
Not that long ago.
Not that long ago.
There we are again.
Within our recent, within our memories. So. Yeah, most of the drilling was kind of focused on the mine environment to about the 180 meter depth, mm-hmm. because they had every intention, as I had mentioned, to go underground.
Right.
And they drilled into zones that were high grade but left open, thinking that they were going to go back, dewater, and access some of that exploration from that underground mm-hmm. workings, which include a 120 meter shaft and 3 levels.
Wow. Okay. So then, is it your expectation as a geologist that the mineralization that's been sort of indicated by these historic results, by historic drilling, not necessarily 43 101, though you did re-assay the core that was there, and correct. You reconfirmed that the resource estimate was more or less accurate?
Correct. What we did was in the fall of 2016, undertook a program of duplicate core sampling. And we selected 22 holes which are representative of the deposit, and got the blessing from our QA/QC consultant at that time that if we could reproduce the historical assays with what we were going to be acquiring from our sampling, then we could use those assays, all the historical data, to be incorporated into a future resource estimate. So what happened from that program, James, in a nutshell, we achieved 94% correlation on 450 samples that, as I said, were representative. A large number of them were high grade. And it's extremely unusual for a high-grade deposit to give you that kind of correlation. So we're very confident of that database, and so is our QA/QC consultant.
Are you finding that investors are a little bit, put off by the remote nature of the location and the undeveloped sort of infrastructure in the area?
Well, it's remote and it isn't, in the sense that logistically, there's two First Nation communities that are based or within about 60 kilometers from the mine site. There's daily flights to those communities. And as long as the project maintains a high grade, that obstacle should not become an obstacle.
Right.
So we really see it as a challenge, but it's not going to be something that I think is going to overall affect the project.
Sure. The company recently released a geophysical map as a result of some airborne that was flown. And
Correct.
There were some very interesting sort of indications in that geophysical image that suggested that similar geology to where the actual Lingman Lake mine existed is present sort of very close by, suggesting there's a potential at least for a much larger sort of strike length of mineralization along that same trend.
That's right, and we commissioned that survey. TerraQuest flew it for us. It was actually completed in March of this year, and it's a high-resolution magnetic survey and a VLF electromagnetic survey. One measures the magnetic sort of differences in the rocks. The other one measures conductive zones.
Okay.
And we use that to determine structure from that type of survey. So our consultant, MPH Consulting, is our geophysical consultants. They took this data, they processed it, and they came up with a very strong correlation between the results of the survey and what's happening at the mine site.
Okay.
So knowing that, you could extend that correlation along the strike of these conductive zones and magnetic zones, which are coincident, and pick out targets. So right now we have 12 targets identified as a result of that. And it now kind of lends the whole project, escalates it to a different level. Now we're at a district play.
Right.
Not only do we have the mine area to prove up the resource, get it to 43-101 compliance, now we have this regional framework in which to explore for extensions or other similar type environments.
Okay, great. Well, let's leave it there. We'll come back to you after the drill program gets underway, and we'll see how you're making out. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for having me, James.